There comes a moment in every life when the outer world no longer satisfies the inner hunger. Success, possessions, recognition, and even relationships cannot quiet the deeper longing within. Something in us seeks a freedom that circumstances cannot provide, and it is in this quiet searching that the soul begins to awaken to truth. The truth that frees the soul is not something new that must be learned. It is something already present, waiting to be recognized. Beneath the noise of daily concerns, beyond the fears and anxieties that occupy the mind, there exists a stillness. In that stillness, truth speaks without words. Most human suffering arises from mistaken identity. We believe ourselves to be limited, fragile beings struggling in a hostile world. We measure ourselves by success or failure, by approval or rejection. But these measures belong only to the surface of life. They do not define who we truly are. The deeper truth is that our essential nature is whole, complete, and inseparable from the source of life itself. Nothing real about us can be damaged by events, and nothing essential can be taken away. When this is understood, fear begins to dissolve. Freedom does not come by changing the world around us. It comes by seeing through the illusions we have accepted as reality. When we stop fighting life and begin to trust the deeper intelligence moving through it, burdens fall away naturally. This truth cannot be forced. It unfolds as we learn to become still. In quiet moments, when the mind ceases its constant striving, a deeper awareness begins to emerge, guidance appears, peace replaces confusion, solutions arise without struggle. The soul is freed when we no longer cling to the belief that we must control everything. Life flows more harmoniously when we allow wisdom greater than personal thinking to lead the way. What once seemed difficult becomes lighter, because we no longer carry life alone. Truth also frees us from resentment and judgment. When we recognize the same divine life present in all people, forgiveness becomes natural, compassion replaces blame. We begin to see others not as enemies or competitors, but as fellow travelers awakening in their own time. The journey is not about becoming something new, but about uncovering what has always been present. Peace is not created, it is revealed when disturbance is released. Love is not manufactured, it is discovered when fear fades. As this understanding deepens, life is lived with greater simplicity. Anxiety about the future loses its grip, regret about the past fades, each moment becomes sufficient in itself. The truth that frees the soul is quiet, gentle, and ever-present. It does not demand effort, only openness, and when we finally stop searching outside for what has always lived within, we discover that freedom was never far away. The soul rests not because life has changed, but because we have awakened to what has always been true. True freedom does not begin when outer circumstances improve, nor when problems disappear, nor when life finally aligns with personal expectations. Freedom begins when a person recognizes that their real identity has never been confined by conditions, events, or situations. Most people live believing they are defined by their experiences, their successes and failures, their health, finances, relationships, and social status. Because of this belief, they constantly struggle to control outcomes, fearing loss and seeking security in things that are always changing. The soul feels burdened because it has accepted a mistaken sense of self, one that depends entirely on external stability. From childhood onward, people are taught to identify themselves with body, personality, achievements, and social roles. One becomes a student, a worker, a parent, a success, or a failure, and over time these labels seem to become the person's reality. Yet these identities shift continuously. Jobs change, relationships change, physical strength changes, and public opinion changes. When identity is built on such unstable foundations, anxiety naturally follows. Every change feels like a threat, every uncertainty becomes frightening, and every loss feels deeply personal. This constant fear is what chains the soul, not the events themselves. Spiritual freedom begins with the quiet realization that beneath all changing roles exists a deeper self that remains untouched. This inner identity does not rise or fall with circumstances. It is present before success arrives and remains after success fades. It is whole before relationships begin and remains whole if they end. It is not increased by praise nor diminished by criticism. When this truth becomes more than an idea and begins to be inwardly felt, a subtle but profound shift occurs. One starts to observe life instead of being overwhelmed by it. Challenges still arise, responsibilities still exist, and emotions still move through experience, yet something deeper remains steady. Instead of saying, "I am broken," one begins to see, "I am experiencing difficulty." Instead of feeling defined by failure, one understands failure as a temporary event, not a personal truth. The soul gradually loosens its grip on fear because it recognizes that its essence has never been harmed. This realization does not make a person indifferent or detached from life. On the contrary, it allows fuller participation without constant anxiety. When identity no longer depends on outcomes, one can work, love, create, and serve without fear of losing oneself. Effort becomes lighter because success is no longer tied to self-worth. Relationships become healthier because love is no longer mixed with possession or insecurity. the pressure to constantly prove oneself begins to fade. Many people carry exhaustion not from work itself but from the internal demand to validate their existence through achievement or approval. When the deeper identity is recognized, actions come from expression rather than desperation. Work becomes contribution instead of survival of the ego. Giving becomes natural rather than strategic. Living becomes an unfolding rather than a competition. External difficulties may still appear, yet they no longer define the person's inner state. A storm may pass across the surface of the ocean, but the depths remain undisturbed. In the same way, awareness of one's true identity allows life's changes to move across the surface without shaking the foundation within. Even in moments of uncertainty, something inside remains quietly assured. As this understanding deepens, fear slowly loses authority. The soul feels lighter because it no longer tries to become something it already is. Freedom is discovered not by escaping life but by seeing that one's essential nature has always been free, even while the mind believed otherwise, and this recognition begins dissolving the invisible chains created by mistaken identity and long-held fear. Many people attempt to discover truth through constant thinking, analysis, and effort. The mind is trained to solve problems, compare information, and search for answers through reasoning. While this ability is valuable in practical matters, it often becomes an obstacle when one seeks deeper spiritual understanding. The intellect continuously moves from one thought to another, producing doubts, fears, judgments, and expectations. In this constant mental activity, truth becomes obscured, not because it is absent, but because the noise of thought prevents it from being recognized. Inner stillness reveals truth more clearly because it allows awareness to move beyond mental confusion into direct experience. The mind tends to operate through memory and anticipation. It relives past experiences or projects future possibilities, creating endless cycles of worry or regret. When attention is trapped in these movements, the present moment is rarely experienced as it truly is. The soul becomes restless because it is constantly pulled between what has happened and what might happen. This mental habit produces tension, making clarity difficult to attain. Stillness interrupts this cycle by bringing attention fully into the present, where truth quietly resides. Inner stillness does not necessarily mean the complete absence of thought, but rather a relaxed state in which thoughts no longer dominate awareness. It is a gentle stepping back from the constant urge to evaluate and control life. When one becomes still even for a few moments, it becomes clear how much unnecessary mental effort usually occupies the mind. Beneath that activity exists a quiet awareness that has always been present, observing without struggle. In stillness, perception becomes clearer because it is no longer filtered through fear or desire. Decisions arise more naturally when the mind is not clouded by emotional reaction. Often, people struggle with choices not because solutions are unavailable, but because anxiety prevents them from recognizing what feels inwardly right. When mental pressure relaxes, intuition begins to guide more clearly. This guidance does not come as dramatic revelation but as a subtle sense of knowing that requires trust rather than force. Many believe they must work hard to achieve spiritual understanding, yet effort itself often keeps the mind active and restless. Seeking truth as something distant or difficult creates frustration. Stillness reveals that truth is not something to be chased but something already present, waiting to be noticed. When striving pauses, awareness expands naturally. One begins to notice peace that was previously hidden by mental noise. Stillness also softens emotional resistance. Much inner conflict arises from trying to fight or escape uncomfortable experiences. In quiet awareness, emotions are allowed to move without judgment, and they often dissolve on their own. Fear loses strength when it is observed calmly instead of resisted. Anger fades when it is met with understanding rather than reaction. Stillness does not suppress emotions, it allows them to pass through without becoming permanent burdens. In moments of still awareness, the separation between oneself and life seems to diminish. Instead of feeling isolated and defensive, one senses connection with something greater. This experience cannot be fully explained through logic, yet it becomes unmistakably real when felt. Peace arises without external reason, and insight appears without deliberate effort. Life begins to flow more smoothly because resistance decreases. This practice of stillness need not be complicated. It may occur during quiet reflection, a walk in nature, or simply sitting without distraction. Gradually, these moments reveal that clarity and peace do not depend on circumstances but on the willingness to pause mental activity. Over time, stillness becomes less an occasional practice and more a natural way of meeting life, allowing truth to shine through ordinary moments and guiding actions without struggle, gradually dissolving confusion as awareness settles into the quiet presence that has always existed beneath the restless movements of thought and emotion within everyday living experience. The soul itself is never truly burdened, yet many people live feeling weighed down by worry, fear, guilt, and constant pressure. This heaviness seems real because it is experienced emotionally and mentally every day. However, The weight does not come from life itself but from the beliefs we hold about life. Reality continuously unfolds in the present moment, but the mind interprets events through layers of conditioning, expectation and fear. It is these interpretations rather than events themselves that create suffering and make the soul feel trapped. From early life, people begin forming beliefs about themselves and the world based on experiences and teachings from family, society and culture. If someone faces rejection, failure, or criticism, they may come to believe they are unworthy or incapable. If they grow up around fear or insecurity, they may assume life is unsafe or that struggle is inevitable. Over time, these ideas become accepted as truth, even though they are only conclusions drawn from limited situations. The mind then filters every new experience through these beliefs, reinforcing them repeatedly. Fear becomes one of the strongest burdens created by false belief. A person fears losing security, losing love, losing status, or losing control because they believe their happiness depends entirely on these things. The mind constantly imagines negative outcomes, creating anxiety even when no real threat exists. This ongoing tension drains energy and creates emotional exhaustion. The soul seems heavy, yet nothing in the present moment may actually be wrong. The burden comes from imagined futures or painful memories, not from reality itself. Another common false belief is the idea of separation. Many people feel isolated, thinking they must face life alone, compete with others and protect themselves from constant danger or judgment. This belief leads to comparison, jealousy and resentment. When someone else succeeds, it feels like personal loss. When someone disagrees, it feels like rejection. These emotional reactions arise not from truth but from the mistaken belief that one's value depends on being better or more accepted than others. Guilt and regret also weigh heavily on the soul when people believe their past mistakes permanently define them. Instead of seeing errors as moments of learning, they carry shame for years, replaying memories and wishing they could undo them. This mental habit prevents growth because attention remains fixed on what cannot be changed. In reality, the present moment always offers a new possibility, yet false beliefs keep the mind trapped in what has already passed. The burden increases when people believe they must control everything in order to feel safe. Life is unpredictable, and no one can fully manage every outcome, yet many live in constant tension trying to plan and prevent every possible difficulty. When events do not go as expected, frustration and disappointment follow. The struggle arises not because life is wrong, but because expectations clash with reality. As awareness grows, one begins to see that many fears and assumptions have never truly been questioned. The mind automatically repeats them, but they are not absolute truths. When examined calmly, many worries lose their power. Situations once seen as disasters are revealed as temporary challenges. Rejection becomes redirection, failure becomes experience, loss becomes transformation. The soul feels lighter as these false beliefs begin to dissolve because life is no longer viewed through constant fear or self-judgment. Compassion toward oneself increases, and understanding replaces blame. Instead of resisting life, one starts to flow with its changes. Problems still arise, yet they no longer define identity or determine inner peace. Reality itself is often simpler than the stories the mind creates about it. When false assumptions are gradually released, one discovers that peace was never absent, only hidden beneath layers of misunderstanding. The soul is freed not by changing external conditions but by recognizing that much suffering was built upon beliefs that were never truly real, and as these illusions lose their hold, the natural lightness of being begins to return, revealing that freedom was always available beneath the fears once accepted as permanent truths governing life and identity. Much of human struggle arises from the belief that life must be controlled in order to be safe and successful. From an early age, people learn to plan, organize, and push toward desired outcomes. Effort and discipline have their place in practical matters, yet many carry this controlling attitude into every aspect of life, believing that without constant management, things will fall apart. This creates tension because life rarely unfolds exactly according to personal plans. When events move in unexpected directions, frustration and fear arise, making life feel like an endless effort to keep everything from collapsing. The desire to control often grows from insecurity. When people doubt their own worth or fear uncertainty, they try to secure their future through forceful action and constant planning. They become anxious about making mistakes, worried about others' opinions, and fearful of losing opportunities. Instead of experiencing life, they are always trying to shape it into a safe and predictable form. Yet this constant effort drains energy and prevents the natural flow of creativity and inspiration from emerging. Letting go of personal control does not mean becoming passive or irresponsible. It does not suggest abandoning goals or refusing to take action. Rather, it involves recognizing that there is an intelligence at work beyond personal thinking, guiding events in ways the mind cannot always foresee. When a person stops trying to force outcomes and instead listens inwardly, decisions become less pressured and more aligned with deeper wisdom. Many people can recall moments when solutions appeared unexpectedly after they stopped struggling to find them. A problem that seemed impossible suddenly became clear after stepping away from it. An opportunity arose when plans failed. Guidance often comes when the mind relaxes rather than when it strains for answers. This happens because intuition and insight function best when mental resistance softens. Personal control is often driven by fear of uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is part of life's creative movement. Every meaningful development, discovery, or relationship begins in the unknown. Trying to eliminate uncertainty prevents growth because it limits possibilities to what is already familiar. When one trusts the deeper movement of life, unexpected paths often lead to richer experiences than carefully constructed plans. Holding tightly to personal control also affects relationships. People often try to manage how others behave or how situations unfold, creating tension and conflict. When expectations are rigid, disappointment becomes frequent. Allowing others the freedom to grow and change without constant pressure creates healthier connections. Trust replaces manipulation, and cooperation becomes more natural. Letting go also frees a person from the exhausting pressure of believing everything depends solely on personal effort. While action is necessary, outcomes are influenced by many factors beyond individual control. Recognizing this allows a person to do their best while releasing anxiety about results. Work becomes an expression of dedication rather than a desperate attempt to secure identity or approval. When inner listening replaces constant mental planning, choices feel clearer. Instead of reacting out of fear or urgency, one begins responding from a quieter place of understanding. Decisions arise with less conflict because they are guided by something deeper than personal ambition. Even when challenges appear, there is greater confidence that solutions will emerge in time. Trusting divine wisdom or deeper intelligence does not remove difficulties from life, but it changes how they are faced. Obstacles become opportunities for growth rather than threats to survival. Mistakes become lessons rather than personal failures. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a journey unfolding step by step. As the need to control gradually softens, peace increases. Actions become more effective because they arise from clarity rather than fear. Opportunities are recognized more easily because attention is not clouded by anxiety. One begins to notice how often life supports growth when resistance fades. Over time, letting go of excessive personal control allows life to move with greater harmony, revealing guidance that was previously hidden by constant effort, and showing that wisdom beyond personal thinking has always been present, gently directing each step toward experiences and insights necessary for growth, fulfillment, and deeper understanding, even when outcomes differ from expectations formed by the limited perspective of the human mind. Many people spend their lives seeking fulfillment through achievements, possessions, recognition, and external success, believing that happiness and peace can be obtained once certain goals are reached. Society encourages this pursuit by measuring worth through status, wealth, or accomplishments. While these achievements may bring temporary satisfaction, they rarely provide lasting peace. After one goal is reached, another desire quickly takes its place, and the search continues. This cycle persists because the fulfillment people seek does not originate in external accomplishments but arises from an inner realization of completeness that already exists. Outer achievements belong to the changing world. Careers shift, wealth fluctuates, reputations rise and fall, and circumstances evolve beyond personal control. When happiness depends entirely on these factors, inner stability becomes fragile. Success brings relief, but fear of losing it soon follows. Failure feels devastating because identity becomes attached to outcomes. The soul remains restless because it seeks something permanent in a world that is constantly changing. True contentment emerges when one begins to look inward rather than outward for meaning. This inward turning does not require abandoning responsibilities or ambitions, but it changes the motivation behind them. Instead of striving to prove worth or fill an inner emptiness, actions become expressions of talents and interests already present. Work becomes creative contribution rather than a desperate attempt to gain validation. Relationships become shared experiences rather than emotional dependencies meant to compensate for inner lack. Many people experience moments when outward success does not bring the satisfaction they expected. After working hard to achieve a goal, they discover that the excitement fades quickly, leaving the same inner longing as before. This disappointment can become an invitation to question whether fulfillment truly lies in external results. It becomes clear that no amount of external gain permanently satisfies the deeper desire for peace and meaning. Inner fulfillment arises when a person recognizes their intrinsic worth independent of achievement. Beneath roles, titles, and accomplishments exists a quiet sense of being that does not need to prove itself. When attention shifts toward this inner presence, a subtle peace begins to surface. This peace is not dependent on circumstances, it exists simply because one is alive and aware. This inward awareness also transforms how success and failure are experienced. Achievements become enjoyable but not essential to happiness. Setbacks become learning experiences rather than personal defeats. Life's fluctuations no longer threaten identity because self-worth is no longer tied to outcomes. A person becomes free to pursue goals with enthusiasm while remaining inwardly balanced regardless of results. When fulfillment is sought inwardly, comparison with others loses importance. Many struggles arise from measuring personal progress against others' achievements, leading to jealousy or feelings of inadequacy. Inner awareness reveals that each individual's journey is unique, reducing the urge to compete for validation. Appreciation for one's own path naturally grows, allowing greater gratitude for present circumstances. Another transformation occurs in relationships. When people expect others to provide happiness or emotional security, disappointment often follows. No one can permanently fill another person's inner emptiness. When fulfillment is discovered within, relationships become freer and healthier. Love becomes an expression of shared joy rather than a demand for emotional completion. Inward fulfillment also encourages simplicity. Desires driven by insecurity gradually lose urgency. Life becomes less about accumulation and more about meaningful experience. Ordinary moments gain significance because happiness is no longer postponed until future goals are achieved. Peace becomes available in everyday living rather than reserved for special accomplishments. The search for fulfillment gradually shifts from chasing experiences to deepening awareness of the present. As inner understanding grows, one recognizes that peace and contentment were never missing but obscured by the belief that they must be earned through achievement. This realization softens the constant striving that once dominated life, allowing actions to flow from inspiration rather than pressure, and revealing that fulfillment naturally arises from recognizing the completeness already present within awareness itself, independent of external success or recognition sought through worldly accomplishments that can never fully satisfy the deeper longing of the soul. Spiritual awakening is often misunderstood as a dramatic or mystical event, yet in many lives it unfolds quietly as a gradual shift in perception. It begins when a person starts questioning long-held assumptions about identity, fear, and separation. For much of life, people operate under the belief that they are isolated individuals struggling in a world filled with uncertainty and competition. This perception naturally gives rise to fear, because survival and success seem to depend entirely on personal effort and external conditions. Awakening slowly dissolves this illusion by revealing a deeper connection with life that has always existed beneath surface awareness. Fear thrives on the belief that something essential can be lost or destroyed. People fear losing security, relationships, health, status, or control because they identify themselves with these changing aspects of life. When circumstances shift, identity feels threatened. Awakening begins to loosen this fear by revealing that the core of one's being remains untouched by external change. Events may affect circumstances, but they do not alter the deeper presence that observes and experiences life. As this understanding grows, fear loses its grip not because problems disappear, but because identity is no longer built upon unstable foundations. A major aspect of awakening involves dissolving the sense of separation between oneself and others. The ordinary mind divides life into categories of me and them, friend and enemy, success and failure. This division leads to comparison, competition, and judgment. People feel isolated, believing they must defend their interests against others to survive. Spiritual awakening reveals that beneath these surface differences, the same life force moves through all beings. When this truth is felt rather than merely understood intellectually, compassion naturally replaces hostility. This shift changes relationships profoundly. Instead of seeing others primarily as competitors or obstacles, one begins to recognize shared human struggles and aspirations. Forgiveness becomes easier because one sees that harmful actions often arise from ignorance or fear rather than inherent malice. The desire to harm or dominate weakens as empathy grows. Relationships become less about control and more about mutual understanding, reducing conflict and emotional tension. Awakening also dissolves the illusion of lack, which drives much human dissatisfaction. Many people live with a constant sense that something is missing. They believe happiness lies just beyond their current circumstances, waiting in future achievements or possessions. This belief fuels endless striving, yet satisfaction remains temporary because the underlying sense of incompleteness persists. As awareness deepens, one begins to notice that moments of peace arise not from acquiring something new but from simply being present without craving or resistance. In awakening, attention shifts from what is absent to what already exists. Gratitude begins to replace dissatisfaction as one becomes aware of life's simple richness. Ordinary experiences once overlooked gain meaning. Instead of constantly chasing future fulfillment, contentment emerges in the present moment. The compulsion to accumulate or compete weakens because fulfillment is discovered inwardly rather than externally. Another change occurs in how challenges are perceived. Before awakening, difficulties are often seen as personal attacks or signs of failure. Fear intensifies because obstacles appear threatening to identity. After awakening begins, challenges are viewed as opportunities for growth and understanding. Resistance softens and acceptance allows solutions to emerge more naturally. Life's uncertainties become less intimidating when one trusts that each experience contributes to deeper awareness. This transformation does not remove human emotions or eliminate all struggle, but it changes one's relationship to them. Fear, anger, or sadness may still arise, yet they are observed without becoming permanent identities. Awareness becomes spacious enough to allow emotions to pass without overwhelming the inner sense of peace. As awakening continues, life feels less like a constant battle for survival and more like a journey of unfolding understanding. The need to defend, compete, or prove oneself gradually fades. Compassion toward oneself and others increases, revealing a natural harmony that was previously hidden beneath fear and misunderstanding. Separation dissolves into connection, lack gives way to appreciation, and anxiety softens into trust, allowing the soul to experience freedom not by escaping life's challenges but by recognizing the deeper unity and completeness that has always existed beneath the illusions created by fear, judgment, and mistaken identity shaping human perception. In the end, the truth that frees the soul is not something distant to be discovered, nor something that belongs only to a select few. It is present within every person, quietly waiting to be recognized beneath fear, struggle, and misunderstanding. Freedom comes not through changing the outer world, but through awakening to the deeper reality of who we truly are beyond circumstance, beyond success and failure, beyond the shifting conditions of life. As false beliefs fall away, the soul no longer carries unnecessary burdens. Stillness reveals clarity, trust replaces constant control, and fulfillment is found within rather than chased outside. Fear softens when separation dissolves, and life begins to flow with greater ease when we recognize the wisdom already guiding us from within. The journey then is not about becoming something new, but about remembering what has always been true. In awakening to this truth, the soul discovers a peace that does not depend on events, a freedom that cannot be taken away, and a quiet assurance that life itself supports our unfolding. And in this recognition, we finally rest in the simple understanding that what we have been seeking has always lived within us, patiently waiting for us to become still enough to see it.